I used to think our house was magic. When I was little, the cracked driveway seemed like a castle road, and the broken porch swing was my throne. My mom would make pancakes on Sunday mornings, humming old songs while I sat at the kitchen table drawing pictures. It wasn't a perfect life. Money was always tight. Arguments flared up over nothing. But there were still moments that felt warm and safe. I used to believe deep down that no matter how bad things got, my mom would always have my back. That belief shattered the day I opened the rejection letter. I sat at that same kitchen table, now sticky with years of neglect, holding the thin envelope like it might catch fire if I breathed too hard. Across from me, my mom leaned against the counter, arms crossed, her mouth a tight line. She tapped her foot, fast, impatient, like she was already preparing for the disappointment she knew was coming. When I read the words, "We regret to inform you," I didn't even have time to react. Her face didn't change. No flash of sympathy, no hug, just cold silence. She left the room without a word. An hour later, she came back with 2 trash bags. "Start packing," she said as if she were telling me to take out the garbage. "You're not going to sit around here wasting space." I froze. Thought maybe she was bluffing. Maybe she just needed time to cool down. But she wasn't bluffing. I begged her to let me stay. Promised I'd find a job. Promised I'd reapply next year. She didn't care. She wanted me gone that night. No grace period. No room for negotiation. By midnight, I was standing on the curb with 2 trash bags, my phone battery dead, my entire future feeling as thin and empty as the cold night air. None of my so-called friends answered my calls. The few family members I reached out to gave vague excuses. Too busy, too far, too complicated. I ended up spending the night at a 24-hour laundromat, huddled on a hard plastic chair, pretending to wait for clothes that didn't exist. I remember the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of detergent and mildew, the way the floor vibrated under the heavy industrial washers. I remember thinking, this is my life now. The next few years broke me down and built me back up in ways I'm still trying to understand. I worked wherever I could. Diners, gas stations, cleaning offices after hours. There were days I lived off free coffee refills and leftover bread. There were nights I slept in my car with the windows cracked just enough to let in air, but not enough to invite trouble. I lost weight, lost friends, lost pieces of myself I didn't even realize could be taken, but I didn't quit. Every time I found a library with working computers, I taught myself something new: graphic design, coding, marketing. I took every miserable freelance gig I could find. I designed logos for shady companies, built websites for restaurants that barely paid me. Little by little, I clawed my way out of survival mode. By 23, I was renting a small studio apartment. By 24, I was freelancing full-time. By 26, I had my own business, modest but mine. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. But I was steady. I was free. And then the call came. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when my real estate agent left a voicemail. A foreclosed property was going up for auction. Cheap, needed work, but the location was solid, and the bones of the place were good. I didn't even feel curious, not at first, until he mentioned the address. My childhood home. I stared at the number on my screen for a long time. A part of me wanted to hang up, delete the message, forget it ever happened. Another part, the stubborn part, the part that remembered every slammed door, every cold shoulder, wouldn't let it go. Within a week, the papers were signed. The house was mine. The day I pulled into the old driveway, I hardly recognized it. The grass was knee-high and yellowed. The paint peeled in wide, jagged strips. The porch sagged like a tired old man slumped over his cane. It hurt more than I expected. Seeing the place like that, this was the kingdom of my childhood, and it had rotted from the inside out. I stepped out of my car and stood there for a moment, letting the weight of it settle on my shoulders. Then I walked up to the door and knocked. No answer. I pulled out my new set of keys, heavy, cold metal in my hand, and let myself in. The smell hit me first. Old beer, cigarette smoke, something sour underneath. Inside, everything was dim and cluttered. Piles of magazines, broken furniture, greasy dishes stacked in the sink. And there she was, my mom, sitting in the same battered recliner, staring blankly at a muted TV, a bottle dangling from her fingers. For a moment, neither of us said anything. She squinted at me like I was a ghost she couldn't quite place. "What are you doing here?" she slurred, her voice rough with bitterness. I held up the paperwork. "I own this house now." Her face twisted. She staggered to her feet, swaying slightly, and pointed a shaking finger at me. "You can't do this," she snapped. "This is my house." I met her gaze calmly. "You did it to me first," I said. And then I handed her the notice, 30 days to vacate. Exactly what she'd given me all those years ago. She crumpled the paper and threw it at my feet. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just turned and walked out into the rain, the sound of her shouting fading behind me. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. The first few days after serving the notice were strangely quiet. I half expected her to lash out immediately, trash the house, call the cops, make a scene. But instead, she disappeared into the walls, as if hoping to pretend none of it was happening. At night, lying in my small apartment across town, I wondered if I was doing the right thing. Was I really any better than she was? Was this revenge or survival? The doubt didn't last long. Every voicemail she left answered it for me. At first, they were soft and tearful. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered into the receiver. "I just wanted what was best for you. I was scared. Scared of what exactly? Of my failure? Of her own?" I listened to every message once, my thumb hovering over the save button, but I never pressed it. Instead, I deleted them all. After a few days, the tone shifted. The voicemails turned mean. She accused me of being ungrateful, of being a heartless snake who didn't deserve forgiveness. She dredged up every mistake I'd ever made, every childhood tantrum, every bad grade, every petty teenage rebellion, as proof that I was the real villain. I listened to those too, not because I believed them, but because it reminded me of why I had to follow through. There was no apology. There never would be. Only manipulation. The day she showed up at my work, I felt it before I saw it. My coworkers whispered near the windows. Someone had pulled out a phone to record. I followed their stares and saw her standing outside in the rain, holding a cardboard sign over her head. The words were scrawled in black marker, barely legible. "My daughter is heartless. Don't support her business." It would have been pathetic if it wasn't so familiar. Security approached her gently, offered her a place to sit, offered to call someone for help. She refused, screaming that I had stolen everything from her. I stayed in my office, hands trembling slightly, pretending to work while my heart pounded against my ribs, not out of fear, out of heartbreak. This was who she was. This was who she had always been under the surface. The rain eventually drove her away. But the damage lingered. A few clients canceled meetings without explanation. A couple of online reviews popped up, fake complaints about non-existent problems. I tightened our policies. I apologized to my team, even though none of this was their fault. And still, a part of me grieved. Not for her, for the little girl who had once believed her mother hung the moon. Days turned into weeks. Every time I drove past the old house, I half expected to see it abandoned, gutted, burned to the ground. But every time, it still stood there, sagging and miserable, a ghost of what it once was. Neighbors noticed the change. A few approached me cautiously, asking if the rumors were true, that I was the new owner. Most of them were polite, some were quietly relieved. Apparently, my mother's late-night shouting matches and questionable visitors hadn't gone unnoticed over the years. One older woman across the street, Mrs. Delgado, brought over a plate of cookies and told me in a hushed voice, "It's good to have someone decent back in that house." I thanked her, even though the words sat strangely in my chest. I wasn't sure if I felt decent. As the 30th day approached, my mother's tactics grew more desperate. She left handwritten notes taped to the front door. Long, rambling letters about how hard her life had been, how much she had sacrificed, how much she needed just a little more time. I didn't respond. I didn't tear them down. I just let the rain soak them until they peeled away on their own. On the 29th day, I parked across the street again. A moving truck idled in the driveway. Two men carried out the few possessions she had left: battered furniture, faded clothes, cracked photo frames. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, face hard, and closed off. No tears, no last-minute appeals. For a moment, our eyes met across the distance. There was no recognition there, no regret, just a hollow sort of hatred. Like I had betrayed some unspoken agreement she thought we had. I stayed in my car. I didn't wave, I didn't smile. I simply watched as she climbed into the passenger seat of an old rusted sedan and disappeared down the street. When the truck pulled away, leaving the house empty and silent, I finally stepped out of my car. The air smelled different, cleaner somehow. I stood in the driveway for a long time, staring at the front door, the peeling paint, the sagging steps. 1,000 memories buzzed in my chest, but I didn't let them take over. This house had taken so much from me, but it wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a beginning. I took the new keys from my pocket, heavy and solid and cold, and walked up the front steps. The boards creaked under my weight, but they held. When I opened the door, the house groaned around me, as if exhaling years of anger and fear. I stepped inside, and I closed the door behind me. The first night alone in the house was harder than I expected. Even empty, it felt full of old arguments, slammed doors, silent meals heavy with disappointment. The walls seemed to hum with memories I didn't want but couldn't ignore. I set up a sleeping bag in the living room, right in front of the fireplace. No furniture, no television, no distractions. Just me and the creaking bones of the house. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I thought there would be some great sense of victory. Instead, I felt exhausted, like I had survived a storm, but lost something along the way. The next morning, I started cleaning. At first, it was mechanical, scrubbing grime from the walls, tearing up rotted carpet, hauling away bags of broken junk. But as the hours turned into days, something inside me shifted. Each stain I wiped away, each cracked tile I replaced, felt like peeling off another layer of bitterness. It wasn't just about fixing the house. It was about reclaiming something that had been stolen from me long before she ever kicked me out. Neighbors waved when they saw me out front, painting the porch or pulling weeds. Some brought over small gifts: homemade bread, extra tools, old buckets of paint they no longer needed. Mrs. Delgado came by again one afternoon with a battered gardening book and a smile. "Plant something new," she said. "Let it be yours." I didn't know the first thing about gardening, but that night I sat on the floor flipping through the book, circling plants that could survive in poor soil and stubborn shade, just like me. Some nights were still hard. I hear a floorboard creak or the wind rattle a loose shutter, and for a second, I'd brace myself for shouting that never came. But over time, the silence became comforting. I filled the rooms with small, deliberate things: a second-hand couch in the living room, bright curtains in the kitchen, framed photos of places I'd been, people who had chosen to stay in my life, even when it was messy and complicated. I turned one of the upstairs bedrooms into an office, complete with a battered old desk I sanded and painted myself. I planted daisies and lavender in the front yard, stubborn little things that refused to wilt even when the summer heat baked the ground. Every nail, every seed, every brushstroke felt like rewriting the story of this house, not erasing the past, but refusing to let it define the future. One evening, about 3 months after I moved in, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun dip below the rooftops. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and warm earth. A cat I'd seen prowling the neighborhood hopped up onto the railing and settled beside me, purring softly. For the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't living in fear. I wasn't living for anyone else's approval. I was just living. A few weeks later, I found a small shop downtown that sold handmade wooden signs. Most of them were cheesy, live, laugh, love type nonsense. But tucked away in a dusty corner, I found one that made me stop. Simple block letters, burned into a piece of cedar. Welcome home. I bought it without thinking. It cost more than I should have spent, but I didn't care. When I got back, I hung it by the front door, right at eye level. It wasn't for visitors. It was for me. Every time I came home, every time I turned the key and stepped inside, I saw it. And every time it reminded me, this house, this life, wasn't something anyone had given me. It was something I had built with my own hands, my own pain, my own stubborn refusal to give up. One evening, standing barefoot on the freshly sanded porch, I ran my fingers over the sign and smiled. Not a brittle smile, not a victory grin, a real one. Small, quiet, strong. The streetlights buzzed to life one by one. The cat curled up by the front door. Somewhere down the block, a sprinkler clicked on, hissing softly in the twilight. And for the first time, truly and completely, I felt it. I was home.